My name is Zahara Alamin, and on April 17, 2004, my life changed forever. I was just a child when it happened, but even now, after all these years, I remember it as if it happened yesterday. The memories are so clear, so real, that sometimes I wonder how I could have ever lived without knowing the truth. I was born and raised in a devout Muslim family. My parents were deeply religious, and our lives revolved around prayer, fasting, and obedience to Allah. I never questioned my faith. Why would I? It was the only thing I had ever known. But the night I died, everything changed. I left my body. I saw my parents weeping over me, praying desperately for Allah to bring me back. I felt myself being pulled toward a radiant light, and in that moment I experienced something that shattered everything I believed. I met Jesus Christ, and when I returned, nothing would ever be the same again. I was born into a strict but loving Muslim household in Casablanca, Morocco. Faith was not just a part of our lives. It was the foundation of everything. From the time I could speak, my parents taught me to recite the Quran, to bow in prayer 5 times a day, and to fear the consequences of disobedience. My father, Hakim, was a well-respected man in the community, always reminding us of our duties to Allah. My mother, Layla, was gentle but firm, ensuring I learned modesty, discipline, and submission to God's will. Some of my earliest memories are of sitting cross-legged on the carpet, listening as my father recited verses from the Quran, his voice deep and steady. I memorized the words before I even understood them, repeating them over and over until they became part of me. I never doubted what I was taught. I believed that Islam was the one true faith, that Allah was merciful but also swift in punishment, and that my only path to paradise was through obedience and devotion. I was only 7 years old when everything changed. It began as a simple fever. At first, my parents weren't worried. They assumed it was just another childhood sickness, something I would recover from with rest and prayer. But as the days passed, my condition grew worse. My body felt weak, and soon I could barely sit up in bed. My mother stayed by my side, pressing cool cloths to my forehead, whispering prayers of healing. My father called for the imam of our local mosque, who came and prayed over me, reading from the Quran as he placed his hands on my burning skin. But nothing helped. The fever refused to break. My breathing became shallow, labored. I drifted in and out of consciousness, my body too weak to fight anymore. One night, as my mother held my hand, her tears falling onto my skin, I felt something shift inside me. I knew even as a child that something was terribly wrong. And then, everything went black. The moment I died, I felt something strange and unfamiliar. Peace. There was no pain, no sickness, no fear. I opened my eyes and realized I was floating above my own body. I could see my parents still kneeling beside my small, lifeless form. My mother's cries were heart-wrenching, her hands gripping mine, begging me to wake up. My father had his forehead pressed to the ground in desperate prayer, tears streaming down his face. I wanted to reach out to them to tell them I was still here, but they couldn't see me. Then I felt something behind me. I turned and saw the light. At first the light was distant, but as I focused on it, it grew brighter, closer, warmer. It wasn't just a glow. It was alive. And then I felt something even more powerful. A presence. A presence so full of love, peace, and authority that I wanted to run toward it, even though I didn't understand why. Then a figure stepped forward from the light. It was a man clothed in brilliant white, his face radiant, his eyes filled with compassion, strength, and something I had never known before: unconditional love. I had never seen him before. Yet I knew exactly who he was. It was Jesus. Everything inside me fought against what I was seeing. I had been taught all my life that Jesus was just a prophet, not the Son of God. That he was not divine, that he did not die for anyone's sins. But as I stood before him, I knew I had been wrong. He looked at me with such tenderness and kindness that tears welled up in my eyes. I felt no fear, only love. Then he spoke my name. His voice wasn't loud, but it echoed through my entire being. "Zahara, you are mine." I began to tremble. This couldn't be real. It contradicted everything I had ever known. But deep in my soul, I knew it was the truth. And then he showed me something that changed me forever. Jesus stretched out his hand, and in an instant I was surrounded by visions. I saw a place of overwhelming beauty where light, love, and joy flowed endlessly. I saw people there, their faces filled with peace and happiness beyond anything I had ever imagined. I knew without being told that this was heaven. Then the vision shifted. I saw a place of complete darkness where souls cried out in despair. I heard screams of regret, voices pleading for a second chance, but there was none. It was a place of eternal separation from God, a place of torment and hopelessness. I felt sick with sorrow. Then Jesus spoke again. "Many choose this path, Zahara, because they do not know me. I came so they could be saved." Tears streamed down my face. I had been told all my life that my prayers, my obedience, my good deeds would be enough. But now I understood the truth. Salvation wasn't earned. It was given through him. I stood before Jesus, overwhelmed by everything I had seen. My heart ached with the truth I had ignored my entire life. This wasn't just a dream. It wasn't a vision or some trick of the mind. It was real. I looked into his eyes and felt love beyond anything I had ever known. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced in Islam. This love wasn't conditional. It wasn't based on how many times I prayed or how many good deeds I had performed. It was given freely. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay with him. But then Jesus showed me something else. I saw my parents still kneeling beside my lifeless body, my mother's face buried in my small hands, my father's whispered prayers growing weaker. I saw my siblings, their faces full of confusion and fear. And I knew it wasn't my time yet. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder, and I felt warmth spread through me, filling every part of my being. You must go back, Zahara. But when you return, you will not be the same. You will know the truth and you must share it. I hesitated. If I returned, I knew my life would never be the same. I would be rejected, hated, cast out. Jesus only smiled as if he already knew my fears. Do not be afraid. I will be with you always. And in an instant the light faded. I felt myself being pulled backward, back toward the world I had left behind. And then I woke up. The first thing I felt was breath filling my lungs. The moment my eyes fluttered open, my mother let out a cry, clutching my face in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. My father stumbled backward as if he had seen a ghost. "She's alive," my mother sobbed, pressing her forehead against mine. The doctors were called in, but they had no explanation. I had been on the brink of death, and yet I was suddenly awake, breathing, stronger than before. It wasn't just that I had survived. I had been healed. I could feel it. There was no more fever, no more weakness, no more pain. I sat up in bed, shocking everyone. My body felt completely restored. The doctors called it a medical miracle. But I knew the truth. Jesus had sent me back with a purpose. For the first few days, I remained silent about what had happened. I was still trying to process everything myself. I had been raised to believe that Jesus was just a prophet, nothing more. But now I had seen him with my own eyes. I had to tell my parents. One night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I sat down with my mother. My hands trembled as I tried to find the words. "Mama, I saw something when I was gone." She looked at me, her eyes full of concern. "What do you mean, Zahara?" I swallowed hard, knowing this would change everything. I saw Jesus. Her face darkened instantly. "No, Zahara. It was just a dream. You were sick. Shaitan plays tricks on the mind when we are weak." I shook my head, tears welling in my eyes. "No, Mama. It wasn't a dream. It was real. I was dead. I left my body. I saw him. And he is more than we were told. He is the Son of God." The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. My mother slapped her hands over her ears, shaking her head violently. "Astaghfirullah. Don't say that, Zahara. Don't ever say that," she shouted. The commotion woke my father, who stormed into the room. When my mother told him what I had said, his face turned cold. He grabbed my shoulders, his eyes searching mine. "Tell me this is not true. Tell me you were confused." I looked at him, my father, the man I had always wanted to please. The man whose approval I had spent my entire childhood chasing. But I couldn't lie. "Baba, I met him, and I cannot deny what I saw." His face hardened. "Then you are no longer my daughter." I felt the words cut through me like a knife. My mother sobbed in the corner, and my siblings stood frozen in the doorway, watching everything unfold. That was the moment I realized that following Jesus would cost me everything. After that night, everything changed. My family no longer spoke to me. My father refused to look at me. My mother, once so affectionate, treated me like a stranger in our home. I was still their daughter by blood, but no longer in their hearts. The isolation was crushing. At times I wondered if it would have been easier to deny what I saw, to pretend it never happened. But how could I? I had met the Savior of the world, so I did the only thing I could do. I prayed, not to Allah, to Jesus. The first time I whispered his name in prayer, I felt his presence all around me, just as I had when I stood in the light. I knew I wasn't alone, and I never would be again. Over time, I secretly found a way to read the Bible. Every word I read confirmed what I had seen in my near-death experience. Jesus had said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." I had spent my whole life believing that salvation came through my own effort, through obedience, through prayers and rituals. But now I understood the truth. Salvation wasn't about what I could do. It was about what he had already done. He had died for me. He had paid the price in full. And all I had to do was believe. If you are watching this and you feel something stirring inside you, don't ignore it. If you have been searching, questioning, wondering if there is more, know this: Jesus is real. He is not just a prophet. He is the Son of God, the Savior of the world, and he loves you more than you could ever imagine. You don't have to earn his love. You don't have to strive for salvation. You just have to accept the gift he has already given you. If this testimony has touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more powerful testimonies of faith. Jesus is calling you. Will you answer?